Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. We just had a magnitude 7.4 earthquake strike the Philippines. And what's notable about this, other than that's a big earthquake and that we've been getting a lot of big earthquakes in 2025, lots of magnitude 7s, even a magnitude 8.8, is that we had a foreshock just nearby, not in the exact location. The magnitude 6.9, 6.8, that zone was right here near the island of Cebu, but this is right nearby. So you could consider that a foreshock. And we talked about that earthquake potentially being a foreshock for something bigger. And well, about a week later, here we are, magnitude 7.4. This just happened within like the past hour, so I'm unsure as to, it's a big shaker. That's a big shaker. So I don't know the level of damage to any of these places. I think it's Davao City. I'm not precisely sure the pronunciation, but there are a lot of people that live in the Philippines, and that's one of the bigger cities there, as you can tell. So they certainly felt that, have no idea as to the level of infrastructure damage, people injured, maybe lives lost, unfortunately. We'll have to wait and see. Hopefully it being further off from some of these main populated areas and being off the coast helped. Depth was 58.1 kilometers. But that's not the only big earthquake that we've had today. In fact, we've had a seismic burst across all of Southeast Asia, Eurasia, the Ring of Fire. There's been just a notable increase in earthquakes today, the 7.4 being the largest of them, containing most of that seismic energy. We also, before that occurred, had a magnitude 6 aftershock up here in Kamchatka. I say aftershock because this was the location of that magnitude 8.8 megaquake, 3 separate magnitude 7 plus earthquakes, 2 7.4s, 1.79, tons of magnitude 6s, countless magnitude 5s and 4s and below. And in my video I released on this specifically looking at this zone, this was like a week or so ago, I stated that if we continue to get magnitude 6 earthquakes here or greater, something's weird. And well, that's continuing to happen. It should be dying down by now after that megaquake. And well, we're continuing to get magnitude 6s. So this area is still very active and alive. Of course, we have multiple volcanoes that are erupting on and off along Kamchatka. Some of them have erupted for the first time in decades or even hundreds of years. So this whole area is releasing a ton of Earth energy. And the context to this is that all this is occurring when we have notable solar activity. We're in solar cycle 25 maximum, but what's odd about this solar maximum is that we have these big coronal holes on the sun. Typically you don't get those during solar maximum. You get them more usually during like the descending phase of solar maximum. And in addition to that, we have all these comets nearby in the inner solar system, and interstellar object 3I Atlas is closing in. This is the best imagery that we got from the ESA. As far as I know, we're still waiting on imagery from NASA other than the Perseverance rover, which was like pictures with a potato cam, effectively, for this sort of task. You know, fantastic rovers. I'm glad that we got something out of them. This is also almost similar to that. It's just like maybe your first flip phone in the early 2000s or something, like the flip phone I had in high school in 2008 or something. So we are waiting for better imagery from NASA that has not been released. The US government is still in a shutdown, but I've been talking about for a while now, at least, well, since we discovered, first observed 3I Atlas, that we should probably expect heightened solar activity and earthquake activity around its perihelion. October, November, perihelion closest approach to the sun for this interstellar object of unknown size is October 29th, October 30th. Well, we're seeing that happen right now with a lot of activity around the world. We also had an earthquake in China. Let me switch over to the USGS latest earthquake map so we can see all these earthquakes. because this one in the Philippines was the strongest, and actually it looks like the one in Papua New Guinea was just upgraded to 6.3. So not a magnitude 6, now a magnitude 6.3. So that is quite a lot more energy. We could do the math. I think that's at least like 3 times more energy than a magnitude 6. Here's the location of that 7.4. We see some aftershocks. One of them is a 5.6, the other is a 5.9. I did already mention this magnitude 6 earthquake up here at Kamchatka, but check this out. We also had a magnitude 5.5 in China. So up in the mountains near the Himalayas, nearby, did not strike one of these major population centers, thankfully, because if it did, a 5.5 can still be quite significant. But that's a pretty notable earthquake too, based off of its location. Then we have a 5.2 down here, a 5.1 right there. And that's more normal activity. We've had some earthquakes down here as well, south of Africa, 5.4 and a 5.2. So just in general, elevated earthquake activity across the globe. And really what's interesting about this, there's 2 things here, kind of 2 coincidences, synchronicities, whatever you want to call it. The depth here, 58.1 kilometers for that 7.4. And then if you go up to the magnitude 6 there in Russia, that is also 57 kilometers, like right in the exact same zone. So that's just a little coincidence. And then another thing too is the timing of this one in the Philippines and the one in Papua New Guinea. So here we have the one in the Philippines. It's at 01:43 a.m. Universal Time on the 10th of October. This is the 1-year anniversary from when we had a G5 minus geomagnetic storm. We are awaiting a big wave of plasma to hit the Earth. We've had some space weather, solar wind stuff. We'll talk about that, but there was this big plasma structure that swept by solar orbiter, perfectly placed in front of the Earth, and yet it has this solar wave hasn't hit us yet. So maybe it's traveling very slowly. I don't know. It's very bizarre. We'll talk about that. But this one occurred right here in the Philippines, you'll notice, at 2:08 Universal Time. So there is only 25 minutes, actually not even that, 24 minutes in between these 2 earthquakes. So 7.4, 6.3, boom shakalaka, back to back to back. That is quite significant. And I think really this is an example of how when we get these, how interstellar and interplanetary forces affect the Earth directly. A lot more research needs to be done on this. Planetary geometry is a really good portal or gateway for people to start exploring this, because we often see notable events like this during significant planetary geometry. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done into this. Hopefully artificial intelligence can help us crunch this data and actually tease out those results. We also had a solar flare today. So a 2.0 M-class flare. And you'll notice that this is the biggest in the past 7 days. So here's this 2.0 M-class flare. That blasted off from the limb. Let me show you that. It's right here. And so we'll see this 2.0 M-class flare blast off. Sunspots are actually really low right now. So they dropped off really quickly. These sunspots rotated out and basically nothing else came in, though we do have new sunspots coming in. So this is the 2.0 M-class flare. We did not get a proton radiation storm from that, though that is the location that you're typically looking for that nice magnetic connection with the Earth in order to trigger a proton radiation storm. This is when a whole bunch of relativistic ions, specifically protons, stream in from the solar wind and hit Earth. And that just in general raises the energy flux up. So we did not have that. We did have a coronal mass ejection impact, but it is very, very muted. And so we did get some of these waves to start hitting us, but not really like we were expecting. Here we see our real-time solar wind. And let me actually go to the 7-day view here. This might be a little easier for us. Here is our geomagnetic activity at the bottom. We see that we ramped up to active conditions, but we did not go into G1 storming. We had the solar wind increase to about double, 2 times normal, which is 10 nanotesla. Normal is 5 nanotesla. This is just a way to measure magnetic field strength. And we did have the vertical component of the magnetic field, which is this Z direction, to go ahead and flip negative, which allows for a good connection with Earth's magnetic field and therefore strong geomagnetic storming. But this wasn't that strong, so this response to that makes sense. You'll notice here that there's a quick jump up in the strength, and that went all the way to 14 nanotesla, so nearly 3 times over normal. But you'll notice that the Z component flipped positive, which does not allow for a good connection to Earth's magnetic field, though this does trigger strong Birkeland currents flowing into the polar regions. And so these are these really powerful electric currents that flow in from the solar wind and connect at the ionosphere, and that allows for circuit closure. The ionosphere is the uppermost part of Earth's atmosphere, goes from about 100 to 1,000 kilometers. It's very conductive. So think of putting 2 wires together and you have salt water in between them, allowing for that flow of energy. If you didn't have that salt water, instead it was, let's say, like a piece of wood, you would have no flow of energy. So you do get strong Birkeland currents during these northward field configurations, but you'll notice our geomagnetic activity effectively stayed low. And well, now we don't see this solar impact coming in, but we do have our data here from the solar orbiter probe. And well, we see the solar impact in the data. So this big shock wave I talked about, and I don't know what the heck is happening because it hasn't come in yet. So solar orbiter is a satellite that we have that's orbiting around the sun, pretty self-explanatory, and it's doing different loops. So here we see the sun, we see the position of solar orbiter, there's the Earth. It's right in front of the Earth, making it a perfect advanced probe for space weather. Well, we have our magnetic field data as collected by solar orbiter. Look here, if you go further back, I reported on this in the last video, if you go further back, there were 4 waves of plasma, or at least 4 bumps in the magnetic field, and none of them were terribly strong. They're all about 10 nanotesla deviations upwards, but it was still like, hey, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have this shock wave right here. It looks like, based on the time, this should be about to arrive, unless this completely misses the Earth somehow. But I don't really see how that happens because solar orbiter is in between the Earth and the sun. Now, solar orbiter, I think it does have a little bit of inclination relative to the Earth, so it's not exactly along the ecliptic plane, but it shouldn't be that. I mean, if this is the inclination 10 degrees to the north, yeah, it's 10 degrees to the north, that should still not really be enough for it to register a shock wave like this that totally misses the Earth. It's not 30 degrees above, 50 degrees above. So based off of that, we are still waiting for this, and it's about to arrive. But I can't say that definitively because I thought this was going to arrive effectively today, and it hasn't. So maybe it's just a little slower than we thought. We don't know what this is from, by the way. This is kind of unknown, and you won't read about this in the NOAA space weather forecast because they don't incorporate this data into their forecast. If you go to our space weather portal, we can go to forecast discussion here and read this at the bottom, and you'll see geomagnetic field activity is expected to be quiet to unsettled over October 10th. Active conditions are expected on the 11th or G1 conditions are likely on the 12th because a negative polarity coronal hole high-speed stream becomes effective. And well, let's talk about that because this coronal hole that we are about to get hit with has been the one that has lined up perfectly with multiple magnitude 7 earthquakes. So let us look at that. It's really quite striking. Here we have our 195 angstrom view of the sun. This allows us to see these deficiencies in the solar corona pretty nicely. So it shows up black. Now this is not an actual hole in the sun. It's just an area where the atmosphere of the sun, the corona, which is made up of a whole bunch of highly vibrational plasma, is deficient. And what happens is the magnetic field of the sun streams out deep into interplanetary space from these coronal holes, and they have a very low density to them in terms of the solar wind plasma density, and they have a very high velocity. like 600, 700, 800 kilometers per second. Normal velocity for a solar wind is, let's say, 350 to 500. So it's quite a bit stronger. This is not yet geoeffective. But what we see, if you go through the record, do it yourself if you want. I've done it, I've shown it on the channel multiple times, but you can go through the record yourself if you want. We have a limited data set, keep that in mind, only a few decades, maybe 50 decades maximum, going back to the 70s. But you can look at all the big earthquakes, and almost every single significant earthquake has a coronal hole either in the central position or in the geoeffective position, somewhere in that range. It's very bizarre. Now, how is this thing, or how is a coronal hole affecting the Earth when it's not yet geoeffective? That's a question I can't answer. But we see time and time again that we get this rhythm to big earthquakes that lines up perfectly with the rhythm of coronal holes, either central on the sun, Earth facing, or in the geoeffective position. So this is going to hit us in just a couple of days. It has diminished slightly since its last rotation, but let's look at another data point here, because this is really where things get interesting. We're going to look at the earthquake activity for the past 3 months thanks to volcano discovery. Watch my mouse cursor. I'm going to turn myself off here, okay? So this goes back to about the 10th of July and goes all the way up to now today. We see this magnitude 7.4 earthquake there for the Philippines, and this is defined by volcanodiscovery.com as very high seismic activity. And we see that here, current seismic activity is very high. You go to extreme based off of their metrics when you go above a magnitude 7.6 earthquake. So here we see that 7.8 that we had recently, and then we see a magnitude 7.4 here. We see a 7.5 right there. Here is our magnitude 8.8 megaquake off the coast of Russia. Remember that 3I Atlas was first observed on July 1st. And so we didn't pick it up until July 1st. Then immediately after that, we started to get this huge burst of seismic activity, as you can see here. And it's been continuing. We have had some periods which are a little quiet, but in general, this is quite elevated as it relates to seismic activity over a longer time span and compared to other years. This is one of the biggest years for seismic activity ever because of this earthquake. And look how it really clustered around here, okay? Well, one thing you'll notice, look at the spacing on this. 7.4, these two right there, that one, they're all almost perfectly lined up in terms of days in between, okay? And while those coronal holes on the sun take about 28 days to rotate from where they are back to, again, let's say Earth facing to Earth facing, okay? It takes 28 days to do a complete loop. So we have this 7.4 right here, and we have that coronal hole exactly Earth facing, about to go geoeffective. Then we had these two big earthquakes right there. This is the 7.9 in Kamchatka, and this is the 7.5 or 7.4 recently. Those also happen with that coronal hole lined up, because you see that again, it's about 28 days. Then we go here and look, it's about 28 days. And then you go here and oh, look, it's about 28 days. So that coronal hole that's currently on the sun, we'll go back to it to give it a look, but now with kind of newfound understanding. That coronal hole on the sun right here is perfectly synchronized with the biggest earthquakes that we've had in the past 3 months, which have been in general the biggest earthquakes that we've had in 2025. We've had some other magnitude 7 earthquakes before that, but that magnitude 8.8 was the biggest, the 7.9, second biggest. And the other big earthquakes were lined up with different coronal holes as well. So it's not like they didn't have coronal holes on the sun as well. They did. So yeah, there's that connection. We have the solar activity and the earthquake connection. The other connection is perhaps 3I Atlas and these comets that are flying around in the inner solar system. Let me pull up our Sky Live viewer, because 3I Atlas is getting closer and closer. So the Sky Live, here we go. And we'll check this out just to see where 3I Atlas is. It is getting closer day by day. and the day is the 10th of October. So it's traveling, well, it was first detected traveling about 58 kilometers per second. It's going to reach 68 kilometers per second according to its perihelion, which is its closest approach to the sun. So it's probably about 60 or 62 kilometers per second at this moment in time, which is very, very fast. It's the fastest ever interstellar object recorded or observed. It's the third one ever observed. And it's also almost certainly the biggest interstellar object observed. That's why we want this data from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the HiRISE camera, because that will allow us to hopefully quantify its size to a much better degree. We don't have that data. NASA's being very slow. ESA released it pretty promptly, right? Within like 3-4 days of the flyby, they released that data. NASA's still, I guess maybe the shutdown's affecting them, whatever. You can go into all the conspiracies if you want. We've already talked about that at length in the last live stream. Let's just say that we still don't have that data. But as it gets closer and closer to the sun, it also gets closer and closer to Earth. Performs a superior conjunction with the Earth back on the 21st, 22nd. It was actually ahead of us in time, but we see that right there. Earth, Sun, 3i Atlas alignment. And then if we go forward, we will see it perform its perihelion. That's around the 29th of October. So that's right here, just to show you that as well. But you see that right there, that's its closest approach to the sun. You notice that it cuts within the orbit of Mars, so it's in the inner solar system. And then if we go forward to December, specifically December 19th, solstice is when we have the closest approach of 3i Atlas to Earth. It never gets super close, but this is when we get the closest to it, because Earth is moving through its orbit, 3i Atlas is moving away, but it's still fairly close in, and boom, that's our closest approach. So what a coincidence that we have solstice, which is a very powerful day energetically. It's the turning of the seasons. We have solstice when 3i Atlas is absolutely closest to the Earth. If it stays on that trajectory, if it keeps doing normal comet/interstellar object things. It's certainly not a normal comet, but in terms of like a normal space rock or chunk of rock or something hurtling through space, that has been semi-normal. It has been quite bizarre. There's new data coming out. None of it definitive though. It's bizarre all around. So that is why when we first detected 3i Atlas, I looked at the history of Oumuamua. We saw the big magnitude 8.8 earthquake hit Mexico, September 8th. Oumuamua, the first interstellar object, performed its perihelion on, September 8th, yeah, and then Oumuamua performed its perihelion on September 9th. This is 2017. We had 2 big X-class flares right on both sides of that. Now that's just one off. Ideally you get a whole trend of these things, but this is only the 3rd ever interstellar object. But we are seeing elevated earthquake activity line up perfectly with the introduction of the biggest yet ever observed interstellar object paired also with solar maximum. It's just a recipe. You basically are just cooking up that recipe, right? Forget some of the little details, don't get lost in them. 3rd ever interstellar object observed, the biggest yet, paired with solar maximum, which was stronger than expected according to the NOAA forecast. It's been about an average solar cycle, but stronger than expected, not solar cycle 24, which is weak. And we've been having tons of earthquake activity. One of the most significant years for earthquake activity and seismic energy release ever. So that is the update for you. This is kind of how I feel. I made this t-shirt here. This is fine. So yeah, comets, UFOs, sun exploding, volcanoes, earthquakes, and more. That really sums up the times right now. So I really encourage you all to take your time to rest and relax as I have been. That's really important. We really don't want to be holding on to excess tension. I recognize that people want these updates and to know what's happening with the Earth, but I also don't want to be causing undue stress on people. And a lot of that's psychological and it's really on the individual. But it's important that we look at these things, we just take the data in if we want, but we don't have to let it trigger us. So just a mindfulness and a wellness tip for you all at this moment in time. I'm on day 6 of a long fast, a long water fast. So I've just been thinking about these things more and thinking about stress and tension and all that. But that is the latest for what's happening with the Earth. A big 7.4 earthquake hit the Philippines. No idea yet as to damage and or injuries, lives lost, hopefully minimal on all counts, but probably there's going to be something because that's a big earthquake and we do have some population centers nearby. Philippines is a densely populated country. 6.3 now in Papua New Guinea, right? They upgraded it. 6.0 up here in Kamchatka. This is still rumbling. This is very odd. This is honestly probably one of the bigger spots I'm watching. It's the place that we did accurately forecast that magnitude 8.8 megaquake a few months in advance in terms of there being a megaquake, and then 3 days in advance in terms of the location. This was the primary location I was looking at for a megaquake to occur. 3 days before, I said magnitude 8.5 or greater is possible, and well, it happened on July 29th. So that is your update for you today. Again, I've been your host, Stefan Burns. Thank you all so much. And if you'd like to check out some of the merch that we have for the channel, Boom Shakalaka t-shirts, Interstellar, 3-Eye Atlas long sleeves, and you can go to earthevolution.com. We also have a whole bunch of holistic wellness products, herb coffee, spirituality, tea blends. Herb coffee is out of stock right now, but it'll be back in stock next week. Spirituality is in stock. All the merchandise is fully in stock, ships from a third party, prints from a third party and ships from them directly. But we also have other tea blends and products, my dad's artwork here, and more. So if you'd like to support the channel, help me help you effectively, then you can go to earthevolution.com/store. I started off with these tea blends and some of these other things because I recognize that these energies can be really intense and it's hard to find high quality stuff nowadays. You buy a Tazo tea and the third ingredient is natural flavors. Meanwhile, they're putting like hibiscus right at the top, but it's the last ingredient. So everyone out there is just hustling, and this is all organic, and it's just loose leaf, and the ratios are really, really simple, and there's no dusting. If you're reading ingredient on there, you're getting quite a good amount of it. So this is really good stuff. Worked hard to bring this to you and actually scale up production. So that's the whole point of that. For everyone in the United States, this is available. Unfortunately, this is not available to anyone outside the United States at this moment in time. So thank you all so much for your support. Wishing each and every single one of you well. Please take care of yourselves. I'll see you all in the next video.